Being New Game Plus 2 unlocks Naamah Prime, and Enoch is plus 3. That is... I did not know... Right, there is a New Game Plus limitation on those. Anyways, we're now going to go see what Estuary Naamah Prime is like. This will be my first time seeing this enemy. Your offering to accept the lilies have been taken, and your sacrifice has been cleansed. Doors are now forever open to you. Whew. Beautiful glowing garden. Estuary Naamah of the Harvest, Keeper of the Forest. It's the Keeper of the Grove or whatever, it's Keeper of the Forest. What? Oh. Got it. Okay, Shockwave seems pretty nice right now. Oh, she makes them in a little heart. I just realized that. You know... That actually makes it easier, honestly, in my opinion. Alright. Now it's less easy once from that angle. Alright. I need to consider using my spell to break a lot of these. Whew. I was gonna say, it can't be long before the split. Oh my gosh, I just realized this was all before we even got the nightmares added. Whew. Alright, got our defenses active. Ah, didn't make the angle. Ooh. You know, if I wasn't so experienced with having to do this fight, this would probably be extremely hard. But as it is, we did it on our first try. Huh. Background is beautiful, but I can't really focus on the background while fighting. But yeah, they defrosted everything. And there we are. That's the new Estuary Naamah, everyone. I'd love to hear the story. So her whole thing is she just always felt beneath the others, like they've always thought less of her. Is the story told here? Here's where the story is told. Okay, first off, never could accept Naamah as an estuary. She was one of the good ones. It's easy to make exceptions after condemning a group. Took me a long time to realize everyone's an exception. Yep, individuals. Yet pirates are still the hardest of the 3 remix bosses because it just changes the dynamic of the fight in a major way. Instead of just making it the fight but harder, it changes the dynamic of the fight. Autumn leaves danced in the sky as a young Naamah opened her eyes. She wiped the metallic taste of blood from her mouth. The ambush had gone terribly wrong. What? She glanced about and found her older sister, Miriam, lying unconscious nearby, her leg clearly broken. As she reached out to her alien sibling, she suddenly felt a cold metal clamp around her throat. She grasped at the gauntlet as Estuary Lamech effortlessly lifted her off the ground to face him. With a desperate cry, Naamah swung her sickle, only to feel it shatter against his chest plate, the farmer's blade useless against the unyielding royal armor. Even as she struggled to breathe, she thought about how she had ransacked their farm, destroyed their home, and ruined their lives. She and her sister had spent their last remaining day seeking vengeance, but their hatred meant nothing to him. She stared deep into his eyes, but only saw apathy. A ghostly blue sword materialized in his free hand, and she braced herself for the end. Lamech, stop! A voice rang out from behind her, and the grip on her neck suddenly released. Devoid of strength, she crumbled backwards to the dirt. She felt the sting of a rock strike the back of her head, and darkness enveloped her. So, yeah, we knew Lamech was part of the... Oof. Naamah awoke with a throbbing headache, and found herself lying on a cot inside a giant makeshift tent. Beside her lay dozens of other wounded soldiers, tended by a handful of doctors and nurses. She turned to see Miriam sleeping on a cot nearby, her leg wrapped in a makeshift splint. The throbbing in her head subsided. You're finally awake. I see they've taken good care of you and your sister. The voice was the same one she had heard earlier. It came from a man in a gold lace cloak, emblazoned with a white and black tree, the sigil of the invading army. She grabbed an empty chair and neatly placed it by her bedside before settling down. My name is Enoch, and I was hoping you could tell me about this. Alright, so Enoch definitely kept his physical disguise hidden. Alright. He paused and fished an apple out of his pocket. Her apple. Nothing grows where armies have fought. The bodies stain the soil, and the metals poison the water. To grow food on that kind of land takes talent. To grow the amount you have takes a miracle. His compliment sparked a sense of satisfaction she couldn't repress, and she hated herself for it. He waved a hand gesturing towards the other soldiers in the ward. The war may claim the lives of thousands of soldiers, but starvation will claim the lives of millions of innocents. I understand your distaste for politics, but the reality is people starve. Kings don't. So will you help us help the people? He hesitated before tossing the apple back to her. He smiled when she caught it. So this is how she became an estuary. Naamah stands up to stretch and looks over her reclaimed land with pride. The topsoil, once scorched and poisoned from countless battles, is now verdant green. Over the years, people have begun calling her Naamah of the Harvest, she who brings feast from famine. She and her growing retinue have walked ceaselessly following the wake of the king's armies. They retilled the land, buried the dead, and cared for survivors from both sides of the battlefield. Wherever she went, the fighting stopped. The king's armies conquered lands, but it was Naamah's army who united them. Oh, I like how they're putting the staircase structure into it. Trumpets blared, and streamers colored the skies as a procession of bards and jugglers paraded through the streets. At the center of all this revelry was a giant raised palanquin wrought with vines and flowers. Carried by 7 men and 7 women, it gave every onlooker a clear view of Estuary Naamah sitting upon its dais. Tonight's ceremony would be forever celebrated as a historically momentous event. The king had appointed the first female estuary into his fold. They were scarcely halfway through the procession, but the palanquin was already covered entirely with lilies of the valley, thrown by the adoring crowds. She remembers placing these flowers on the graves of the fallen, but now they have become her symbol, and she was determined to honor it. Naamah pushed aside her veil and waved to the crowds, then felt an empathy ache in her heart, for she knew Miriam would not be amongst them. By swearing fealty to the king and becoming an estuary, Naamah has cemented her identity as a traitor in her sister's eyes. Miriam wished for a free world. Naamah simply wished for a better one. She wondered if she would ever speak to her again. At home under the canopy of the Kerguelen forests, Estuary Naamah pored over weekly cultivation reports sent to her by Stygian study scholars. She could feel the land and trusted it, but the scholars would not leave anything up to intuition. Every foot of land was tirelessly graded and monitored by Estuary Enoch to ensure the forest flourished. Yet beneath the pages of measurements and predictions, she found markings that were out of place. S++, encircled by hearts. Intuition told her this bit of silliness was meant for her eyes alone, and a smile graced her lips. The baby kicked, and she reflexively put her hand to her stomach. She glanced around nervously, but thankful she was alone. Extending the bloodline was an obligation every estuary had to their king. Many children, many souls. But all those children, only the father had been an estuary. Her child, however, would be the product of 2 estuaries. And she knew what the consequences would be if it were to be discovered. Ah. I'm just going to keep reading and then I'm going to talk. Please take care of her. Naamah read the note one last time before sealing it inside the envelope and placing it beside her baby. The envelope was plain. Only a simple drawing of a heart with 2M written inside to adorn it. The only thing. It wasn't much, but it was all she could muster. She kissed her child one last time, then placed the crib of knotted branches down in front of the farmhouse door. From a distance, Naamah watched as the door opened and her sister Miriam answered the cries of the mewling baby. So first off, whoever Miriam is has the strongest child. That might be the question. That might be like the super boss, the secret super boss, and has some sort of connections to the eggplant. Which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, good. Anyways, that's something. So it's Naamah and I think Enoch? It sounded like she was saying it was Enoch. Naamah definitely has no interest in Lamech. Or is he of the age? Irad seems too prideful to really involve him. I can think of something there, but not in a good way. Yeah, I think it's Enoch. It sounds like it's very much implying it's Enoch. Makes me feel better about dying. I'm repeatedly to that guy. Yep. Exactly. You already jump when he jumps in close space. I go under. Yeah, no, he's a fun fight, I'm certain. It's just... So it is worth noting, I am pretty sure I'm under-leveled. Like, I'm at level 400. They're at level 900. So... Also worth noting, I have a little theme that one of my burdens is to increase the damage of traps. So, like, I have that maxed out. So, any of those little trap fiends here, if those hit me, they will wreck my face in. I think they two-shot me. So, it is better to take a hit from Enoch than a hit from one of those traps. No! Oh, thank goodness I was able to cancel that out. Thank goodness I found some space, but like, my gosh, there really was no safe space there, it felt like. Ah. Come on. There we are. And we're just going to use all of them. There we are. You're never going to not use Wind Wall again, are you? Well, this boss has a lot of... The majority of this guy's attacks are projectiles, so... It makes sense to use Wind Wall here. And then, yeah, Wind Wall's a good spell. I actually wasn't using Wind Wall earlier, by the way. This is an intelligence build. So this build actually cripples itself in damage by taking Wind Wall. Ah. I use all my charges. Whew. So here's the question. Is there a phase 3 now? Is there a phase 4 now? I'm ready for it. Alright, well, everyone, here comes the lore. So with Naamah's, the lore seems like these two estuaries were much closer than expected. Also, I never talked to you. His head was always in the clouds, trying to solve problems that didn't need to be solved. If you just looked down a little sooner, things might have been different. Enoch crumpled the despicable letter in his hand. He was being reprimanded for not spreading his seed? Oh god, so it has to be the same theme. Absolutely preposterous. He saw the letter in the charade it was, a formalized attempt to perpetuate a thoroughly detestable and toxic tradition, and he, for one, refused to acknowledge its legitimacy. He understood that one of an estuary's primary duties was to keep the legacy going. But the kingdom of Genesis, yep, Genesis, had grown such that its population now rivaled that of the surface. This tradition now only served to satisfy an estuary's carnal appetites and desire to subjugate. He had made clear his disdain for his practice numerous times already, but his remonstrations were falling on deaf ears. Let the others carry on with their traditions, he thought. One true partner was more than enough for him. Enoch's makeshift observatory hung curiously off the eastern ramparts of the Stygian study. He instructed his assistant, High Scholar Murmur, to open the windows while he carefully adjusted the lens on his telescope, taking in the breadth of the kingdom of Genesis. Enoch slowly panned across spires of Citadel Agartha and beyond the burning bridges of Axis Mundi to focus on the gatehouse leading to the Welland Plateau. Within the gatehouse lay the giant Void Beast, and in its entrance stood Lid Estuary Lamech. Did Lamech try to take on the Void Beast? Is that what it's about to say? After the rebellion, Lamech had locked himself into his chambers and refused visitors. It was many months before Enoch coaxed him outside, and many more before he could convince him to confront the Void Beast. But as he watched his brother stand before the giant doors, Enoch knew his efforts were for naught. For despite all his fury and bravado, he knew Lamech was a soldier, and slaying a Void Beast was in direct violation of Irad's orders. After Lamech turned to leave, Enoch felt a wave of despair overtake him, and lost his strength. High Scholar Murmur tried to steady his master, but Enoch could not hold himself, and crumpled to the floor. The gravity of the situation was suffocating, but he was left with no choice. In order to save the villagers and Naamah, Irad had to die. So he was doing this all to help Naamah! Oh my gosh. He was doing this to help Naamah more than anything. Like his notes say otherwise, but it's to help Naamah. A section of the black root finally fell to the floor, and Enoch slumped down next to it in exhaustion. His fingertips, now black and gnarled, hummed with a resonant pain as the poison seeped through his body. Despair settled over him as his mind went over his recent failures. He failed to evacuate Naamah and the villagers before the gates were sealed. He failed to cure the dragon and stop the eternal winter. He failed to convince Lamech to stand with him against Irad's orders. Yeah, Tubal? So Tubal was definitely corrupted first, because he poisoned the dragon by being in there. He failed to convince Lamech to stand with him against Irad's orders. All he succeeded in doing was poisoning himself and High Scholar Murmur. But it was all due to his malignant growth weaving its way through the kingdom. Despair gave way to anger. As Enoch grabbed his knife off the floor, he hacked away mercilessly at the black roots. With each strike, his anger grew. His axe became more and more vicious until all that was left was an impossibly knotted core. He stabbed at it until the tip of his blade broke. He took an axe and hammer to it, yet the shifting black morass refused to be compromised. With his anger redoubled, he grabbed at the knot with his gnarled hand, wishing to tear it out in frustration. But as his fingers made contact, he was shocked they made no purchase. They instead slid effortlessly within. In an instant, he felt his whole body drift away, and a white light exploded in his head. So he got combined with a knot. Enoch found himself floating in space, free from the confines of his body. He did not know how he knew this, but he was now part of the Black Roots, and could sense what it could. The roots stretched on for thousands of miles, across countless other worlds and planes of existences. He realized the knot he had struck was only a point in the network of roots that existed in his world. Gone was the study, as new planes of experience opened up within his mind. In one world, it seemed the dead roamed freely across the land, and flying metal cubes swarmed the night sky. In another, a battle raged on a foot of a massive armored tortoise, as explosive weaponry fired out of its metallic shell. I'm sure these are actual games that they're referring to. Dead road freely, flying metal cubes, like... I have to go check what other game seller games made, because I feel like these have to be references to it. Enoch tried to reach out his mind and grasp onto any artifacts he could find, if only to convince himself it was real. He reached for a strangely shaped drill here, a black metal hammer there. Everything he touched disappeared from that world, yet somehow he knew they were being pulled into his reality, like a faded memory forced into existence through sheer recollection. Despite the sensory overload, he could still sense the black roots pulling at him. It was a pull that absorbed the souls of the dead and dying, and brought them back to the glowing white tree at the center of it all. Countless different worlds, each within their Stygian manifestation, feeding their own tree. Some trees were saplings, while others were so large their branches wrapped around the moon. But despite each tree being different from the next, he knew that they were one and the same. He wanted to stay and learn more, to experience more, but he could feel the tree rejecting his body. As Enoch awoke, he was horrified to find the black root enveloping most of his body. He knew he could not save himself, but he needed time to recreate the poison, for it was the only thing powerful enough to stop Irad. But he could feel his strength drain from his body as his limbs hardened like wood. He needed to find some surrogate to transfer his consciousness into before the roots overtook him. So all the roots is part of the black... It's part of the black roots taking over. The life of a mimic test proved more trying than anticipated. Transferring his soul into this new vessel brought him precious time, but without proper limbs, he was forced to use his former body as a puppet to perform the actual work needed. He also realized it would be impossible for him to infect Irad with the poison once he had concocted it. That duty would have to fall to someone else. There was no time to find a trustworthy candidate. He could feel the black root pulling at his mind. Soon he would be gone, and the rest would be left up to fate. Enoch scuttled into the makeshift observatory with his wooden puppet in tow. Behind him, the bridge that once connected his chambers to the study ramparts were now gone, replaced into another plane of existence. It was the last precaution necessary to safeguard the poison. He had hoped the clues he left behind would be enough to find a worthy successor. He tried peering through his telescope one last time, but the ash clouds had become so dense, Naamah's domain could no longer be seen. With a heart heavy with regret, he summoned his wooden body to his work desk, and willed it to put pen to paper. Come to read my memories, have you? Don't be shy. I knew this thing would come.